Ever find yourself staring down a deadline, with maybe a plate of cookies or something, promising yourself, okay, one for every paragraph or something like that?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're the type to threaten yourself with like extra chores if you don't hit the gym.
The classic carrot and stick.
Right. Like we basically built our whole understanding of motivation on this idea of rewards and punishments. But what if I told you all those carrots and sticks, the very foundation of what we think motivates us, might actually be holding us back?
Hmm.
We're diving into Drive by Daniel H. Pink, and this book unpacks some seriously eye-opening research about what really gets us going.
Yeah, Pig basically says, those traditional rewards and punishments, they got us this far, but we're due for a motivation upgrade. He calls it Motivation 3.0.
I like it. Motivation 3.0. So, to kick things off, Pink dives into this fascinating experiment from way back in the 60s, the Soma Cube puzzle. Have you heard of this one?
I'm vaguely familiar, yeah.
So basically, they gave people this puzzle to solve, but here's the catch. Some were paid for each solution, right?
Okay.
While others just got to, enjoy the challenge for the fun of it. Now, if you had to guess, which group would be more motivated to solve the puzzle?
Well, logically, you'd think the ones getting paid, right?
Right. Money equals motivation, or so we think. But get this, the results were totally the opposite.
Oh, really?
During free time, the folks who weren't getting paid, they kept playing with the puzzle. But the paid group, over it.
Wow. So it's like the reward, the money in this case,
Yeah.
actually made them less interested.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, when you pay someone to do what they love, they no longer love it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The reward, it actually seemed to, crowd out their intrinsic motivation, that joy of just figuring out the puzzle.
And this wasn't just a one-off, right? Pink, he highlights a ton of studies with similar results.
Yeah, like that experiment with the candle problem.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The candle problem. Okay, so for our listeners who haven't heard of that one, break it down.
So they give people a candle, a box of tacks, and some matches. And the goal is to figure out how to attach the candle to the wall.
Sounds simple enough.
Right. But some were offered money to solve it faster.
Ah, okay, so that element of competition and reward comes in again.
Exactly. And guess what? The ones who were offered the cash, they actually took longer to solve it.
No way. I would thought the pressure of the reward would make them work faster.
You'd think so, but it actually seemed to block their creativity. They were so focused on the reward, they didn't even think to use the box.
They got stuck in the box, so to speak.
Exactly. So the reward, it actually hindered their problem-solving ability.
Okay, so rewards aren't always the answer? Makes you wonder about punishments then, right?
Right, because surely those work.
So Pink, he throws in another curveball. The daycare fine study. Ever heard of this one?
Vaguely, yeah.
Okay, so they started charging parents a fine for picking up their kids late. You'd think lateness would go down, right?
Makes sense. Hit them where it hurts, their wallets.
Right. But here's the kicker. Lateness actually increased after the fines started.
Wait, what? Seriously?
I know, it seems counterintuitive. So Pink's take is that the fine, it kind of shifted the parents' mindset.
How so?
It became less about a social contract, right? Being respectful of the daycare teacher's time, and it became just another transaction.
Interesting. So instead of, I need to be on time, it's like, well, now I'm paying for this extra time.
Exactly. So if those traditional rewards and punishments, those carrots and sticks, aren't always the answer, where do we go from here? What does work?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Pink, he proposes a whole new way of thinking about motivation, something he calls Motivation 3.0.
Motivation 3.0. Catchy. I like it.
Right. And the basic idea is, instead of those external carrots and sticks, it's about tapping into our intrinsic motivation, that drive that comes from within.
Okay, so less about chasing external rewards, avoiding punishment, and more about finding that inherent joy in the activity itself.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, it's not just some, fuzzy feel-good concept. Pink, he backs this up with decades of research.
Okay, so hard science, not just self-help vibes. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. And he basically says that all of us, we have this innate desire for three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And when those needs are met, that's when our motivation really soars.
All right, I'm seeing how this connects back to those experiments we talked about, like with the Soma puzzle. It's like
Right.
when you take away the reward, suddenly the people who are getting paid, it's like they realize, hey, maybe this puzzle wasn't actually that fun to begin with.
Exactly. The reward actually kind of masked their true feelings about the task. They weren't solving the puzzle because they enjoyed the challenge. It was just about the external validation, the money.
And with that candle problem, it's almost like the pressure of that reward, it actually stifled their creativity, that ability to really like master the challenge in a way that leads to those really out of the box solutions.
Exactly. And it's not just about puzzles and candles, right?
Yeah,
Think about it. Don't you feel most motivated when you have some control over how you're approaching a task?
for sure.
When you feel like you're like growing, improving,
100%.
and when you can see that bigger purpose in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. But how do we actually create that kind of environment? Whether we're talking about, our own lives or in the workplace or wherever, how do we actually cultivate that?
So Pink gives all these really cool examples of companies and individuals who are actually putting this into practice. And one that always sticks with me is Atlassian.
Atlassian, refresh my memory. What do they do again?
They're a software company, and they do these things called FedEx Days.
FedEx Days. Okay, I've definitely never worked anywhere that offered that perk.
Right. So the idea is they give their engineers 24 hours to work on any software problem they want, no strings attached.
Oh, wow. So like a free-for-all of coding and creative problem solving.
Exactly. And it can't be anything that's part of their regular work. It's got to be something totally different.
So it's like encouraging them to tap into their own passions and interests within that like broader framework of their work.
Exactly. And these FedEx Days, they've actually led to some of Atlassian's most innovative solutions.
That's amazing. I love that. It's like by giving employees that autonomy to just explore, to follow their own curiosity, they're unleashing this whole wellspring of creative energy.
Exactly.
Okay, so autonomy, huge. But what about mastery? I feel like we all have that drive to feel like we're getting better at things, but it's so easy to get discouraged, Like, how do we stay motivated when we hit those inevitable roadblocks?
Totally. And Pink talks about mastery as a process, not an endpoint. It's about that constant striving, that joy of, pushing your own limits and seeing yourself improve little by little.
It's like that feeling when you finally nail a really difficult guitar riff after weeks of practice.
Yes.
Or when you finally perfect that recipe you've been working on forever.
Exactly. It's those moments that give us that feeling of accomplishment,
Right.
and that actually fuels our desire to keep learning and keep growing. And it makes you think, what if our education system was actually designed around this idea of intrinsic motivation?
Oh, interesting. You're saying like instead of rote memorization and standardized testing, what if it was more about like helping kids figure out what they're passionate about?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then giving them the freedom and the support to actually pursue those passions.
Because that's where that real learning happens, right? When you're engaged, when you're curious.
Exactly.
It's like instead, we're almost like training kids to be motivated by the A on the report card
Right.
instead of the joy of learning for the sake of learning.
Which is so much more powerful in the long run. Okay, so we've talked about autonomy, we've talked about mastery. What about that third element, that sense of purpose? How do we tap into that?
Yeah, because it's not just about being good at what you do, right? It's about feeling like your work has meaning, like it actually makes a difference.
100%. And that sense of purpose, it can be incredibly motivating. Think about it. Don't we all, at the end of the day, want to feel like our work matters?
So how do we actually like break free from this whole like type X carrot and stick cycle? Because it does feel like it's so ingrained in everything.
It definitely takes a conscious effort to shift things. But the good news is Pink offers some really practical strategies for actually like putting this Motivation 3.0 framework into action, in our own lives.
Okay, give me those actionable takeaways. I'm ready.
So one of the most powerful things, he says, is to actually rethink how we use rewards.
Okay, so you're saying no more bonuses, no more raises, no gold stars. I'm out of here.
No, it's not about ditching rewards entirely. It's more about being more strategic about how we use them.
Okay, I'm listening.
So like instead of using them as those classic like if-then dangling carrots, try shifting the focus to recognizing effort and strategy.
Okay, so instead of like hit your sales target, get a bonus, it's more about acknowledging, hey, I really appreciate the like all the smart decisions and the hard work that you put in along the way kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like, hey, I noticed how you really took that customer feedback to heart, and came up with a really creative solution. It's about acknowledging the process, not just the end result.
Okay, so it's less about the destination, more about like celebrating those little wins along the way.
Yeah, I can see how that could be more motivating in the long run for sure.
And then when you do offer rewards, Pink suggests trying what he calls now that rewards.
Now that rewards. Okay, you're going to have to like break that one down for me.
Okay, so imagine this. Instead of that classic like if-then setup, you surprise someone with a reward after they've accomplished something.
Okay.
Like, hey, now that you've totally crushed that presentation, let's celebrate with a team lunch.
Oh, I see. It's like a spontaneous acknowledgement of a job well done. Instead of like that kind of like predetermined carrot, it's more celebratory.
Exactly. It kind of takes the focus off of that external reward and puts it back on, like the intrinsic satisfaction of a job well done and the shared accomplishment. It's kind of crazy how such a subtle, like, shift in language can make such a big difference.
It really is all about reframing those mental models. And speaking of reframing, another thing Pink talks about is designing environments that foster flow.
Oh, yeah, flow, that feeling of being so in the zone, so engrossed in what you're doing that time just kind of melts away.
Exactly. And while flow can feel almost like magical when it happens, there are actually some concrete things we can do to set the stage for.
Okay, like what? Give me the secrets.
So one key ingredient is having really clear goals.
Okay, so knowing exactly what you're working towards.
Right. Like, what are you trying to achieve? What's the desired outcome?
Yeah.
But almost as important as that is getting immediate feedback. And think about, like, how addictive video games can be. It's like they're constantly giving you that feedback, that sense of progress, even if it's just like, those little wins along the way.
No, totally. Those little dopamine hits keep you coming back for more.
Yeah.
But how do we create that same like feedback loop in, say, like a work environment where things aren't always so like instantly gratifying?
Yeah, that's the challenge. But it doesn't have to be complicated, right? It could be as simple as having more frequent check-ins with your team.
Okay.
Or just finding ways to like visually track your progress on projects in a way that feels more, concrete and satisfying.
Yeah, I love those like project management tools where you can move those little tasks across the board as you get them done.
Exactly. Anything that gives you that sense of progress.
Love it. Okay, so we've got clear goals, we've got immediate feedback. What else is there?
Okay, so this one might seem kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised how often it's overlooked. And that's making sure there's a good match between a person's skills and the challenges they're facing.
Right. We don't want to be stuck in a job that's way too easy. But on the flip side, we don't want to be constantly in over our heads either, right?
Exactly. That sweet spot in the middle is where it's at.
Back to the Goldilocks zone.
Right. And this is where autonomy comes back into play. When people have some say in like what projects they take on or even just like how they approach a particular task, they're more likely to find that sweet spot, where they can really get into that flow state.
It makes me think about all these companies that are embracing like remote work and flexible schedules. Maybe it's not just about where people work, but also about giving them more control over how they work.
100%. It's about creating those environments where people can actually thrive, where they feel trusted and empowered to do their best work.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like when you treat people like capable, intrinsically motivated humans, they're more likely to rise to the occasion.
Exactly. It all comes back to that fundamental belief in human potential. That idea that we're not just cogs in a machine, but we're all creative, driven individuals, and we're capable of, truly amazing things when we're able to tap into our own unique, like, inner drive.
I love that. So to our listener out there, if you're feeling kind of stuck, whether it's in your career or just like, in your day-to-day life, maybe it's time to kind of take stock. Like what actually gets you fired up? What are those things you're naturally drawn to? What are your passions? What are you naturally good at?
Yes.
And then figure out ways to like weave more of those things into your everyday life.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to experiment, to step outside of your comfort zone a little bit, and really challenge those old assumptions about what truly motivates you.
You might be surprised at what you discover about yourself and the incredible things you're capable of when you can tap into that power of your own, like, true, authentic motivation.
100%.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. But seriously, if this conversation resonated with you, go check out Drive. Daniel Pink, he really lays out a compelling case for rethinking the whole, like, paradigm of motivation.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a must-read for sure. All right, until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep that inner drive burning bright.